Welcome to the Nano podcast. I'm your host, Will Chernlin, and I'm excited to have you join me on this journey through the world of nano companies. For the past decade, I've talked to thousands of business owners across various industries. It's been an enlightening experience revealing the vast tapestries of entrepreneurship and innovation that thrives beneath the surface of mainstream media coverage. Each week, I will interview different leaders of nano-cap publicly traded companies to learn about their history, what they do now, and their future. As a reminder, none of this information is financial advice, and it is all for entertainment purposes only. Let's start this week's episode. Hi, everyone. In this episode, we have Desmond Wheatley, the president and CEO and chairman of the board of BEEM Global, stock ticker BEEM. BEEM Global is an innovative company that creates sustainable products for clean mobility. Desmond, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Well, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Can you tell me a little bit about your background before getting into BEEM Global? What you're working on and kind of what led up to working at BEEM Global?
Yes, actually, in many ways, BEEM Global is like the sort of the perfect spot for me to be in now because it brings together almost everything that I've done in my life. So I have an engineering background. I spent a lot of time in energy, both in the US and also in the Middle East and in other parts of the world. And then I've done a lot of deployments of infrastructure as well. And so this sort of combination of energy, engineering, and deployments of infrastructure has put me into a spot where BEEM Global, which is a sort of combination of engineered products delivering infrastructure for the charging of electric vehicles, more or less a perfect spot, I suppose you could say.
And kind of what came first? Did your interest in solar panels and charging infrastructure, did that come first? Or did the market have to catch up first where you finally figured out as an engineer, hey, this actually is the most cheapest, easiest way to get energy to these spots on Earth? Or what came first that made you interested in something like BEEM Global?
Yes. Yeah. So definitely one of my many failings in life is that I'm often too early to technology parties, but I'm rarely wrong about them. And fortunately, I've got a tremendous amount of energy for things that I believe in. Back in 2010, I started looking at the electrification of transportation and recognized then that it was going to be an enormous task to get all the charging infrastructure in the ground if we were going to use the kind of siege mentality to deploy grid-tied chargers, digging trenches, pouring concrete, going through permitting and engineering, connecting to the utility grid. All of these things seem to me to be likely to take a very long time. In fact, so long that it wouldn't keep up with the adoption of the vehicles. Beyond that, I was also aware of the fact that the US grid and in fact the global grid doesn't have enough electricity capacity to supply the electrification of transportation. Not surprising at all. It was never designed to replace oil as transportation fuel. The combination of these things led me to think we need a rapidly deployed, highly scalable and productized solution. So instead of bespoke projects for every EV charger deployment where every trench is different length and every set of concrete is different and all that sort of stuff. What we needed was a mass-produced product, kind of the Henry Ford, if you like, of EV charging infrastructure. And that's what we produced. Now, as I say, we were a bit early. Back in 2010, there weren't very many electric vehicles on the road and we were producing solar-powered electric vehicle charging stations. But the industry's caught up now. We're incredibly busy. We're growing very rapidly. And I think we're still only at the beginning of it. This is a massive undertaking and it will take everything that we can throw at it and everybody else for that matter to succeed.
So you alluded to it a bit, but for those who don't have a computer in front of them and can't just search and see exactly what your product is, which it's one of those things as soon as you see your product, you're like, oh, okay, I get it. For them, through their ears, explain exactly what does BEEM Global, what's kind of the core product, why are you different, why is it kind of an all-in-one system, and explain kind of the battery part of it too, please.
Yeah, so we have a suite of products, but I'm going to talk to you about the two main ones. The first one is EV ARC, Electric Vehicle Autonomous Renewable Charger. You'll underline that word autonomous. This is a product which we deliver to a customer's site. It's deployed into a standard legal size parking space, but it doesn't reduce available parking in any way at all because the vehicle parks on it. And it generates and stores, very importantly, stores its own electricity. So it doesn't need to connect to the utility grid because it's providing its own electricity, and it's then storing that electricity in batteries. Predominantly, we're getting our electricity from solar power, but we also use light wind for a couple of our products as well in places where it's windy but not necessarily sunny, or where it's both. And so what we do is we take renewable sources of electricity, we store them in batteries, and then we deliver them to anybody's off-the-shelf quality electric vehicle charger. So we're not actually in the electric vehicle charger business. We're in the business of producing products which replace the construction, the electrical work, the permitting, the engineering, and all the other things that you need to do to make a grid-tied charger work in a lump of concrete in a parking space. And that's really the crucial aspect of our products. Because they generate and store their own electricity, because they're deployed without construction or electrical work, generally never have to get a permit for them. And so we're able to put an EV charger in a parking space in less than an hour. And that's a process that takes 2 years in New York City, which is our largest municipal customer, 18 months in the state of California, which is our largest state customer. So you can see we're going from 2-year process, 18-month process to a 1-hour deployment, because as I say, we've essentially productized that entire process. The EV Arc product that I'm talking about is wind rated for 165 mile an hour winds. It's flood proof to 9.5 feet. In fact, we just put out a very interesting press release a few weeks ago showing our product still operating in Florida during Hurricane Helene in 8.5 feet of storm surge. The whole entire bottom part of the product completely submerged, but the lights are still on, still reporting, still producing electricity. So it's an incredibly rugged product, which is providing EV charging and an emergency source of power without any construction or electrical work, and even when the grid doesn't work.
Yeah, if you go to any of the major like AI companies and say, create an image of what a parking lot would look like in the future, the EV Arc, it's like scattered all over them. It's like subconsciously people know that this is the future. It's like a almost street lamp kind of canopy type charger that covers any area. And so I was going to ask you about like you're talking about kind of the New York and LA area and being able to get one installed so quickly. How much of it is just that it's just your product is so ready to go off the shelf? And how much of it is that you don't have to connect to the grid so that you just can get approval almost immediately, since you don't have to make sure that you are balancing yourself within the grid too?
Yeah, it's actually both things. So the product itself, it folds down on itself like a satellite before it goes out to space. So it's able to fit inside a 20-foot shipping container. We also have a specialized transportation system we call Arc Mobility, which is used to tow it down the highway. When it arrives on site, it has some hydraulics that are operated by a single human being with a remote control. And those hydraulics deploy the thing. So it folds out, again, just like a satellite arriving in space. That single operator puts it in a parking space. Again, it doesn't reduce the available parking. And deploys it within a very short period of time. So not having to do construction, not having to do electrical work, not digging trenches, not doing soils testing, not doing all of those sorts of things, that's a massive benefit that the product has. But you're also correct to point out that because we don't connect to the utility grid, we don't need anybody's permission to do this. Our customers call us and say, we want EV charging. And we say, okay, where do you want it? Which parking space? We'll take them through a little consultative sell because we want to do an insolation study, make sure that there's enough sunlight hitting that space so there's not a better space on the parking lot. And then we bring the thing over there and drop it off and turn it on. We don't need the utilities permission. We've never had to get a building permit in any jurisdiction. We've got thousands of these things deployed across the United States and now in Europe and in the Levant. And so it's just highly scalable, very deployable, and doesn't require the permission of others so we don't have to go through that whole process. Our BEEM Spot product, which is another product that we have, is a street light replacement. Take out an existing street light, put BEEM Spot in its place. It has a tracking solar array, so the EV Arc tracks as well. By the way, that gives us about 25% more electricity than a fixed array. But it also has a light wind turbine on it. The purpose of this product is to rapidly deploy on-curb EV charging, because most people actually don't live in places where they can charge their cars at home, contrary to popular belief. So this allows people to charge on the curb, and it allows us to deploy again without doing any trenching, without doing any major construction or electrical work. And all the while, we're adding capacity to the grid, but we're doing it without having to actually connect to the grid. So we don't need to build a massive power stations, transmission and distribution. We're just deploying a lot of highly distributed capacity, which frankly is the way the grid will look in the future anyway. I guess we're doing today what the utilities will do tomorrow.
No, 100%. And as I do more and more research into the grid and how the energy needs to go somewhere. You can't just plug in and have these kind of different places generating energy everywhere if it doesn't have some place to go. Tell me a little bit more about your work in the Levant. I saw as one of your products, you even can do desalination with one of your Tell me a little bit more about that, like how it can help in disaster relief areas and such.
Yeah, so BEEM, I'm very, very proud of this product. I mean, it's really hair on your forearm stuff. It's based on the EV ARC platform, so it's the same patented platform with a lot of the same engineering that's going into it. But instead of being designed to charge electric vehicles, this product's actually designed for war zones. And what it does is it allows us, because it's equipped with an integrated desalination plant, we can deploy near salt water, brackish water, or dirty water. We can take that water, run it through our system, it cleans it, turns it into potable water. So the system provides potable water in war zones and post-disaster areas. It also supplies electricity for cooking and for the refrigeration of medical supplies and that sort of stuff. And then, crucially, it has 4 highly ruggedized e-mopeds. Now, why is that important? Well, it turns out when you talk to the NGOs and the other organizations who are trying to feed people in Gaza, for example, southern Lebanon, post-hurricane zones, it's not good enough just to make the food and provide water. That's essential. But then they need a means of delivering it to the people who need it the most. And you can't drive cars down streets that have been bombed, the rubble and then everything in the streets. But typically what happens is very quickly people clear a sort of a 2-foot wide path down between the rubble, and you can ride these highly ruggedized scooters down there. So this is a product which provides life-saving drinking water, provides life-saving electricity, and provides the means to deliver the fruits of what it provides to the people that needs it, all under this patented engineered platform that we've had it deployed for about a decade now and thousands of them. So it's very rugged, very tried and tested. In fact, it's the same platform that survived the 8.5-foot storm surge and all the hurricane winds in Helene. It's a very, very rugged product. It's not often that you get an opportunity to create and deliver products that actively save people's lives. So we're very, very proud of it. And I'm sorry to say there's a great opportunity for it too. I mean, you'd think this would be one of these sorts of things, you only get 1 or 2 of them, but it turns out the world needs an awful lot of them.
No, 100%. I can imagine between you all and like Starlink, that's kind of the first thing you'd want to drop into any sort of disaster zone to be like, you got communications back, you got powers, you got some sort of way to transport people you need to. No, I'm 100% on your side. It's very, very cool that you're working on all that.
Yeah, I mean, fresh water is absolutely essential to human life. And it turns out that that's one of the things that goes first, especially in war zones, but also post-hurricane. With storm surge, you get the groundwater gets contaminated with salt water, turns brackish. It's a hard thing to deal with. And so this rugged product sort of takes care of that and keeps people with the things that they absolutely need to survive.
So say you, Miami Beach wants to install 24 of these along the beach there. How does maintenance work? Do you all contract with the city? Is it if you partnered with ChargePoint, then it's up to ChargePoint to maintenance it, or how does maintenance work? Because it seems like something that once you build it, it's kind of just there forever. There's no reason to ever get rid of it. It's kind of like a part of the infrastructure now.
It's interesting you should say that, because it's funny in the past how often customers have bought our products telling us we're going to use your product while we're waiting to go through all the permitting and construction to put the permanent stuff in, and then they never do it because they figure out they don't need to, having deployed our products. Yeah, so a couple of different things there. First of all, you mentioned ChargePoint. ChargePoint is, of course, an electric vehicle charging station provider and operator. We're not in that business, but interestingly enough, a lot of our units do have ChargePoint chargers deployed on them. New York City, for example, uses the ChargePoint network. So they call us. They say, hey, we want another 100 ChargePoint chargers deployed across the 5 boroughs, but we don't want to do the construction. We don't want to wait 2 years. We don't want to rely on Con Ed for the electricity. And we definitely don't want our police cars not to operate when there's a blackout or brownout, which happens more frequently than at any time in our history. Our products, of course, solve for all those things. So the ChargePoint chargers come to our factory in San Diego. They're integrated onto our product in San Diego, and then our product is shipped with the chargers to New York City, ready to operate. Maintenance, whether it's in Miami Beach or New York or anywhere else, is provided either directly by us, our own technicians, or by outsourced resources that we have who we've trained. And so typically when we need a lot of boots on the street across the country to do kind of low-tech fixes, we use the outsourced resources that we've trained. If there's anything that's more technical in requirement, then we're going to pop somebody on an airplane. But I'm very happy to report the product is very robust. We use the highest quality components we can get our hands on. We do not cut costs where the BOM is concerned. And the result of all that is that the failures are infrequent and in many cases can be solved remotely because we have telemetry. We're communicating with the units over the air all the time. And so just like your laptop, sometimes rebooting the thing is all that's required to make it work.
And with your product, just like the ARC, being so straightforward and kind of solving all the problems at once. I almost feel like, do you have like problems sometimes applying for government contracts since it is so straightforward and that you like they have all these boxes they want you to check, but it's like too simple?
Yeah, I mean, we've won some pretty major government contracts. We have a GSA contract in place with the federal government. We also have a BPA, Blanket Purchase Authority, with the federal government. U.S. Army, incidentally, is our biggest customer. Marine Corps is up in the top 10 there. Navy, even Space Force uses our product. We're deployed at the Pentagon. And these contracts are not easy to win. It takes a long time. The government goes through a lot of due diligence, similar with the state of California, state of New York, and many others. And you're right to point out that because of the unique nature of the product, that can kind of be a little bit tricky for us sometimes, because governments never like handing out non-competitive contracts, right? But when there's something very, very specific that they need, they want that, and it solves so many problems for them. So there's a little bit of tension there. What ends up happening is they write a request for proposals. And what they do is they look at the things that really matter. Must be deployed rapidly, must be deployed without construction, must fit in a standard legal size parking space, cannot reduce available parking on the property. So you can't just throw a container or something in that parking space or a big lump of concrete and bolt stuff to it. All of these attributes, they write into the RFP, and then it's competitively let. And that's the way we like it, frankly. Anyone that can come along and meet the attributes ought to be able to win the contract. And I'm just happy to report that because we do have such a unique product and we have such good patents and IP protection on it, so far we haven't lost one.
And then kind of piggyback on the doing business with the government. There's all sorts of money swimming out there for EV chargers through the federal government and the Build Back Better and such, and their infrastructure bills. How do you handle that as a leader of the company where you know that there's kind of this revenue down the road, but you also don't know exactly how long it's going to take for the municipalities to get through what they want to do with it, and then eventually it trickle down to you? How do you forecast for that, and how do you decide when to double down? Because it's on one end it's the biggest boon, but the boom for your business, but on the other end it's not like you get it overnight. It's going to take a while for it to kind of trickle down to you.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the biggest challenge that we face where this is concerned is that they, and understandably, I'm not having a dig at them, but people, government, utilities, and others are still trying to use last century solutions for this century's challenges. In fact, not even last century, it's the century before it, frankly. And so what you see the government, federal, state, municipal governments desperately trying to figure out how to make the grid do all of this for them. Utilities, the same thing. And what we really need is we need people to start looking for solutions which are of this century and taking advantage of the new technology. We couldn't have made our product 20 years ago. The technology simply didn't exist for it. Thermal management, battery solutions, the generation capabilities, the tracking that we have, none of these things even existed 20 years ago. So really, where government contracting is concerned, actually the biggest challenges that we face is that often the language that's in the request for proposals doesn't even contemplate solutions like ours, right? It's all about, we need a bid to dig a trench. We need a bid to pour some concrete. We need a bid to, pull wires and install a grid-tied EV charger. And hang on a minute, you don't need to do that. That we could do this much faster, much less expensively for you. So we've spent a lot of time educating. We spent a lot of time in Washington D.C. Talking to the various different agencies, Department of Energy, Department of Transportation. We spent a lot of time in states and municipalities, just saying, hey, listen, guys, we're not saying don't connect anything to the grid. You should connect to the grid, but it's not the only arrow in your quiver. There are other ways of solving your problems. And if you need scalability and you need it to happen quickly, you need low cost and you need resilience that will continue to operate, charge police cars and other cars during blackouts and brownouts, then you better look for a non-grid connected solution. And that's what we offer.
Yeah, no, it kind of goes back to my previous question of, they ask you for a feasibility study of how you connect to the grid. And you got to attach this document that just says not applicable.
Yeah.
And you just feel kind of like an idiot applying for these contracts.
Yeah.
And you're like, no, it's actually pretty straightforward. We just handle it all.
Yeah. One of the we get all the time is, what are you going to do during a blackout? Well, it's simple. We're going to keep charging your cars. That's one of the major differentiators between us and everybody who's connected to the grid.
And then from that point of view, do you ever want to some certain municipalities connect back to the grid because you're just going to have too much power and you might as well sell it back to them? Or is that something where it opens up a whole nother can of worms that it's just not worth going down that route?
So the answer is we are actually grid connected in many places. The product is
Oh, okay.
capable of taking power off the grid and putting power on the grid. I don't think there's ever a good economic argument for selling power back to the grid in that sense, but I'll tell you where it becomes really important. The first one is for oddly enough, utility companies who like having distributed energy storage because it helps them balance their grid. When there's a peak in demand, they can reach into the batteries, even sometimes just for a few milliseconds, and prevent a rolling blackout or a rolling brownout. Similarly, when they have an excess of electricity, at some time when people aren't using a lot of power, they can put it back into the batteries, and that really helps them. Utilities love running flat line, as close to a flat line as possible where power demand and supply is concerned. So the product's very capable of doing that, and we certainly don't discourage anyone from doing it. But you're also sort of right about the can of worms thing. I think that as soon as you say, okay, we're going to connect it to the grid, now there's a construction project there, now there's permitting, now there's electrical work, now there's all these other grid, transformer upgrades and all sorts of other things. And so what our general advice to people is deploy the unit without connecting to the grid. Get your EV charging when you need it quickly and all that sort of stuff. And now you, in sobriety and in the fullness of time, you're not in a hurry anymore. You can connect to the grid whenever it suits you in the future, but you don't have that rush and you're not without EV charging while you're waiting for it.
And then another thing as I was kind of thinking about your product, something that with the rest of the world, everything becoming more and more expensive, inflation and such. And it seems like you are in an industry where the cost of goods sold might actually be going down over time as like solar panels just become more and more efficient, or if they actually become cheaper, and then batteries, same diff, they're becoming more efficient, more cheaper. So how do you handle like version of the EV ARC version 3, or is that something where you go, we don't even think past version 3 because we don't even know what the price are going to be, or the technology is going to be like, or kind of how do you handle an uncertain future in such a booming industry?
Well, and you're right. In general, over the last, we've been making that product now, as I say, since 2010, 2011. And what we've seen over the last 14 or 15 years is deflationary cost impacts. No question about it. I mean, the solar modules that we're deploying nowadays, they're 4 or 5 times more powerful than they were when we first started deploying them, and they cost 4 or 5 times less. And by the way, we're already on version 4 or 5 of the product. We're constantly improving it. We're constantly eking out more power and more efficiency. But the thing is, that doesn't actually end up in a cost reduction for us. And the reason for that is because everybody always wants more power. So what ends up happening is that as the cost comes down in the various components and capabilities, we just pump more density into the product. So the product costs about the same as it did when we first started rolling them out 10 or 14 years ago, but it's 5 times more energy into electric vehicles than it was at that time. So I guess you could say your cost per energy unit into the vehicle is greatly reduced, but the product doesn't, the sticker price doesn't really come down. Having said that, we've only ever once increased our prices, and that was during this last very severe inflationary period that we had. We had hyperinflation where we saw certain components increasing, not by percentages, but by 4 or 5 times pre-COVID costs going into things. Seeing that stabilizing now, costs starting to come back down, but again, we'll absorb all of that and just pump more energy out of the system one way or another. A bit like, again, back to laptops. Laptops never get any cheaper, but they get a hell of a lot more powerful.
That was exactly what I was thinking in my head, that like for the last 15 years, a laptop's still about $1,200.
Yeah.
But a laptop is that much better now for a solid laptop for $1,200 compared to
exactly the same thing.
I think I was reading that you have a battery factory in Chicago. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah, so we were a consumer of batteries. We still are. We were buying batteries from other people for the first 8 years or so of our existence, and that was, there was a supply chain risk there, also just costs, and also we wanted to make sure that we could make batteries which were bespoke and just right for our products. So having deployed a lot of people's technology, I ended up buying the company whose technology I liked the best, and so they're now Chicago based, and that's now our BEEM battery manufacturing business, which we acquired through an acquisition in 2022, if my memory serves me correctly.
And how much does that help with, like, say, like the military contracts too, that you have more and more of your products sourced locally, opposed to, I can imagine a lot of your products like solar panels and all that normally comes from some sort of Chinese source. And so there's more and more they like that you have your stuff local and assembled locally and all that.
Yes, I must say we don't buy solar panels from any Chinese source at all. None of even the
Wow.
components going into it goes in there. And part of the reason for that is because we buy the most energy dense solar panels you can get your hands on. Chinese are really good at mass producing, lots of stuff less expensively, not quite this where we need it to be. So none of our modules, in fact, not even any of the components or elements of them touch China. But you are right. In fact, we just recently announced that we have again qualified as BABA compliant, so Buy American, Build American compliant. And this is as a result of us, it is a government requirement, but it's also a philosophy. You might have gathered I'm an immigrant. I love this country. It's been good to me. I'm trying to be good back to it. And we have always sourced everything that we can in the United States philosophically. And so it does help us. Yes, it's certainly easier to secure the U.S. Army as a customer with a U.S. made product where the lion's share of the materials and components are manufactured in the U.S. or made with U.S. materials. It's not possible, unfortunately, to make the thing entirely without relying on overseas product in the day and age that we live in. But we do our best to source everything that we can in the US and comply with the government requirements, which we do.
Well, and yeah, nice for tariffs, future proofing your business, all that type of stuff. It has more than one benefit for sure. So
Yes, it does.
looking about 5, 10 years down the road, what does it look like? Is there 1,000 of these in every metropolitan city,
Yes.
or how do you see it? And do you see the growth mostly in the Levant and Europe first, and then California, sunny places like Austin, Texas next, or kind of how do you see it pan out?
It's funny you mentioned the sunny places because we actually have more product deployed in places that people don't typically think of as being very sunny. I mean, you can New York in the winter, not a very sunny place, but the product is very well engineered, performs very well, certainly performs better when it's in cool, sunny conditions. But perfect is the enemy of good in this business. The key thing is to provide something that produces enough miles for the use case that you're going after. If you do that, anything above that's just overhead. So 5 years from now, yes, to your point about 1,000 units in every city, I like where you're going with that, and I'll tell you why. Because I think the EV charging is going to mirror Wi-Fi in terms of the way it's deployed. At the moment, people are thinking about small numbers of DC fast chargers, which is a gas station experience essentially. That is not the way the EV driver fuels their vehicle. Not even today. Most people that own EVs quickly learn that topping them off every day, providing them with what we call DRR, or daily range replenishment, charging them like they charge their cell phone is a much more efficient, better for the vehicle, and a hell of a lot easier for the customer to do. So I think what you're going to see is EV charging like Wi-Fi. It will be everywhere. It will be ubiquitous. It won't need to be very fast, just like Wi-Fi doesn't need to be very fast as long as it's quick enough to do your emails and some Netflix. You don't need gigabit speeds of Wi-Fi. Similarly, you don't need very fast charging. The average US sedan drives 30.4 miles per day. Even on 1 hour slower chargers, an hour and a half, it gets its full daily range replenishment. And we know that most vehicles are idle at least 22 hours a day, so it's easy to find an hour and a half. So yeah, 5 years from now, you'll see it everywhere. Also 5 years from now, I think you'll start to see an increase in wireless charging and some other technologies. We're patent pending on wireless charging right now. We've proved it works. It's a fantastic solution. Think of that future where you just drive into your nearest supermarket, pull onto one of our units, and just walk away from your car. You don't even plug it in. You don't need to do anything else. It's just filling up with sunshine while you're spending your 47 minutes, which is the average dwell time in a US supermarket for a customer. That's half your daily range replenishment. You didn't even plug in. You just walked away from it. So it's a very exciting future, actually. And then the last thing I'll say is, for 100 years, 100 plus years, the fueling transaction has been identical. The fuel has been diverse, but the fueling transaction has been identical. So ships use bunker oil, aircraft kerosene, motorcycles gasoline, trucks diesel. But the transaction's always been the same. Unit of energy goes into a tank and you part with your cash right there. I don't care what vehicle you're in. What you're going to see in the future is the fuels will actually become less diverse. It'll all be electrons, all be kilowatt hours, but the transaction's going to be as diverse as the great innovative minds in this country can come up with. You're going to see all sorts of fantastic business models. And in fact, we just deployed the first of them, a Driving on Sunshine network where the driver charges for free and it's actually paid for by subscription or by sponsorship of a large insurance company. The Driving on Sunshine network brought to you by Globus Insurance. But the driver doesn't even pay. They just plug in and walk away from their car because the value in this is not the electrons or the kilowatt hour. The value in this is the marketing message and the sponsorship. But there are a lot of other models that you'll see down the road. And I think that's honestly one of the most exciting things about the industry.
No, they're very cool. And yeah, no, to your point, it's always never made sense to me that Costco doesn't have free power for my Tesla.
Yes. Well,
As a Costco member, it seems like that would make total sense.
They might do in the future.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, if people want to learn more about what BEEM Global is up to, what your products do, where should I send my audience?
BEAMforall.com. BEAMFORALL.com is a great place to start. Otherwise, just call us and hell, come and see us if you're in San Diego or in Chicago or in Belgrade or in Craiova.
Awesome. Sounds good. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Desmond. And for those of you still listening, please remember to subscribe and review. Thanks.
This podcast is for informational purposes only and does not provide financial, legal, or any other advice. The information is not investment advice or any offer to buy or sell any securities or to make any investment. The views expressed by the guests are their own, and any reference to third-party products, services, or information does not constitute an endorsement therefore by NanoCap Podcast or its affiliates. The NanoCap Podcast express disclaims all liability for any individuals used